Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Wolfson.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And I got to tell you, it is a little bit weird because when I recorded that intro with Jody Lynn's piece in there, I recorded it on a day when I was kind of losing my voice and I was just kind of getting over a cold. And here we are doing a show today, and guess what? I have a cold. Jody Lynn, I'm sensing a pattern here. I don't like this pattern. I don't like it at all. But it's been a few weeks since we had you on. Did you get the spring planting done?
Yeah, almost. We're like 95% done. It's the home stretch, and I'm excited for the Canada Day long weekend. I will actually get to relax and go in my friend's pool.
What a concept. Relaxing during planting season? Oh, my God.
Who knew a farmer was allowed to relax?
Right. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're going to try to continue that relaxation theme a little bit because relaxation takes a number of different forms, including relaxing yourself within your life. Of course, we talk about that a lot here on the show, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more with our guest today. His name is Avi Wolfson, and I won't try to tell his story. I'll let him do it. But he's all about reactivating that internal spark, and we're going to have a great conversation about that. But Avi, you tell us your story. First of all, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you all. Doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show. Really excited to be here and just, really excited and looking forward to connecting and speaking with you.
So tell us the story of Avi Wolfson. How did you get to where you are right now?
Let's see.
In 300 words or less, you can,
Well, let's see. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I'm very much a homebody. So been here most of my life. Out of high school, I joined the military, did the National Guard for a few years. I did some schooling, and I had my daughter at a very young age. I was 22. My daughter's 12 now. She just graduated from middle school. I'm very happy and excited for her. And so my big thing that I'm after is becoming a public speaker. So that's been quite a journey. I'm part of a couple different communities. That work is very meaningful to me in terms of making a change and difference in myself and also for other people and leading positive direction. And I don't just do that though. I also have a lot of experience in the self-publishing space, and various other projects. So I'm all about, having eggs, the farmer mentality, right? You've got a lot of different eggs and putting them in different baskets, not just relying on one, right? If one doesn't work out, then it's like, now what, So I have a lot of different things going on that I'm excited about. Keeping busy is what I like to do, but also having time for myself is very important. So mindfulness is something that comes to mind, and happy to talk on that, to have somebody that's influenced my thinking around that. Well, actually, multiple people. Got Sam Harris, Wim Hof, and Amish Jha. And Amish Jha, she wrote the book Peak Mind. And the thing that she mentioned, the big takeaway for me was practicing mindfulness by meditating for just 12 minutes per day, 5 days per week, for a total of just 1 hour per week. Not only strengthens attention, but also leads to overall improved brain health and well-being. So there's a lot of benefit to that, and we can all do it. We make excuses and, find things to do, but taking that moment to just stop what you're doing and just even if it's for a very brief period, to just be present and not stuck in all this stuff, that we get stuck in every day, is just really beneficial. So, that's something that I think about. So, that's a quick, overview of where I started from and where I am now. I also have a full-time role. I do sales, for a CRM, and, let's see, that's the meat and potatoes. So,
okay. Where does the idea of reactivating the spark come from?
Great. So that's in the whole speaking aspect, right? So another thing that I did, this was in 2019. I was living in Somerville, Massachusetts at the time, and I had a guest. So there's a third bedroom, and that was reserved for Airbnb. So I had a guest. She came in from Germany. She was a professor, and she said, "Avi, they're throwing axes." And I'm like, "No, that can't be possible. It's not something that happens. Like, people don't do that. I'm like, she's like, no, really, they're doing it. And she dragged me there. And next thing I know, I'm throwing axes at a board, which just felt very awkward at first. But then I signed up for a season and I won a championship.
Wow.
That was pretty cool. So that was a very pivotal point for me in my life, and it changed me drastically. It made me realize things that I didn't think I was capable of. Things I had struggled with growing up a lot, and it had given me this like renewed sense of confidence and belief in myself and what I'm capable of that I didn't know that I was, right? I didn't believe that I was a champion, but that gave me the insight to be like, I can be a champion, and this is just like the tip of the iceberg. I actually have a much bigger purpose. And that's when I started thinking about, well, how do I make more people champions? How do we manufacture that feeling of being a champion, right? Because everybody deserves to be a champion, right? I didn't want to just win for myself. That's a very selfish thing, right? And then I did it 2 more times. So I actually won 3 championships, and I would have been happy with just 1, but hey, I'll take 3. That's great. But like, I would love to see other people that felt like me growing up, trapped, struggling, not having a whole lot of, struggling with like, self-esteem, self-worth, confidence, all these things that I struggled with, to give other people that opportunity to do that. So that's something like in my side of my head that I've been thinking about for a long time. But like, yeah, that was like the beginning of that journey where it set me on a path to being like, you know what? People have always told me that I'm good at this, but when you have people that tell you something and maybe they're not even your friends, maybe they don't even like you, but they're like, wow, you're really good at this. For me, that was speaking. Wow, Avi, you really inspire me. Like that is the single greatest feeling in the world to me. When somebody tells me that I inspired them, there is no greater happiness. It's like, wow, I've made a difference in somebody's life, and that is such a good feeling. And when that happens to anyone, not just me, but anytime we're in life and we don't know what we want to do, because we're all trying to figure out what it is that we're supposed to do. What is our purpose? What is our sense of being? And it's not just having a job that you do it and it pays the bills. No, it's about finding actual happiness in what we do, right? If you're happy and you do what you love, that's really where it's at, right? That's what it's all about, right? So for me, that was discovering like becoming a speaker. So getting back to my point to answer your question, the process that I developed is BAC, which stands for be a champion. B, balancing realism with optimism. A, activating your spark. C, changing your narrative. These are the components, the blueprint that I figured out for myself that allowed me to go from a loser, really, how I felt, not actually, but that's how I felt for many years, to discovering the champion within myself that I did not know existed. So that was very transformative for me, and that has been a very powerful thing. And that's something I speak on, right? Because I want to give the tools and the ability to make other people champions, right? Because there's 2 different types of mindsets, right? There's a champion, somebody who wins for themselves. Look at me. I'm all great. Like they want to be in the spotlight. And then there's somebody who's like, you know what? I want to help the people around me to become better. We can't make no single person can change the entire world, but we can at least change the people around us, right? For better. I mean, and there's a great quote by Bob Marley, which is that the greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his ability and integrity to affect those around him positively. And that quote resonates with me very, very strongly. Because I think that part of our purpose here is, obviously we want to do the best for ourselves. We should have goals, but like, if you're not helping somebody else in this world, I think we're missing the point. We're supposed to leave a better path for, future generations to make it easier than it was for us. Right. So that to me is anyway, part of my purpose and belief and why I want to speak, professionally. So, does that answer the question to BAC?
Well, yeah, not only does it answer the question, but you, as so often happens, you're taking me to a conversation I had earlier today with someone else. Literally, this is tying directly into something I was talking about. Now, with this other person, I was communicating about status, because we live in a society that's very stratified, and status is important to everybody to one degree or another, some people more than others. But I was making the point that status is really more about self-confidence than it is about some sort of a pre-structured order. And so when I'm listening to what you're saying, I'm realizing I could have taken that a step further, because you made the really good distinction that, you weren't actually talking about status. You were talking more about how you feel about yourself and what you feel like a champion and so forth. But that feeling of the champion, that's like that's being on a new status level, right? And you were talking about how important it is to be a champion where you are championing others. And that brings the whole idea of status to an entirely different discussion point. Because status is not only about, well, where am I compared to everybody else, right? But you're talking about, well, where am I in comparison to how I'm helping everybody else? It's almost like we've turned status on its side. Mm-hmm. It's like sideways from where it was before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much truth in that. And I think there's different trains of thoughts, right? There's different ideals about society. Oh, you can't have rich and you can only have rich and poor. There can't be like a middle ground. We have to all fit in a specific class. And I think that's old school thinking. And I think everybody in this world, there was a book that I saw a while ago, and it was a book on Superman. And it said something about there was a comparison, was like seeds, like every seed deserves a chance to grow. And like in retrospect to like people, right? Every person deserves a chance, right? So I think it's along that line of thinking that like, as a species, we should be trying to, further help and develop, especially like some other countries that are really, really struggling, with just like the most basic things. And there's fantastic projects like Charity Water. There's so many good things that are really changing the lives of like future generations to give these places resources that they haven't had for such a long time. And I think that, I'm not really into politics. I think it's all nonsense, but like, I think
I second the motion, by the way. And by the way, I have a political science degree, so I can say that with credentials.
Yeah. So to me, that's all nonsense. What I care about is leaders, people that have integrity. There is no integrity in politics. In politics, what I see is people skimming off the top. I see people that are, power corrupt, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. The people that are supposed to be the models of the highest level of what a civil and good citizen should be are not those people. It's the people that are leaders that are going out of their way to try and help others. I think, and to me, that's what I admire. Those are the people that I look up to. And also recognizing that any great leader, they could not just do it all on their own. We all need to have somebody. We all need to have support, in some way or another. Now, that brought me to another train of thought, which is, so when I was doing axe throwing, I had a coach, and I couldn't have won it without him. His mindset was like, he taught me things about mindset that were incredible. And one of the things he taught me was stab KT, which sounds really horrible, but I promise it's not.
Yeah.
S, someone believing in me. T, thinking maybe I can. A, acting as if I can. B, believing I can. K, knowing I can. And T, trusting you will. And I just kept going through that in my mind, and it really changed me, right? So there's such a powerful thing about mindset and leadership. And, I do hope that more leaders arise, because I think most of us don't reach self-actualization. It's not an easy thing, but it's a worthwhile journey. I'm trying very hard to reach that place, because I think the people that do reach that place often have very, very good common traits that they share. We have a lot in common about the way we view the world, what we think would benefit people for the betterment of, mankind. I think that there's a lot of overlap there. But yeah, now I'm just going on a tangent, so I'm not sure where I want to go next. But
we could actually subtitle this show "Rabbit Hole," because that's where we go just about every single episode. So you're not out of the norm here. This is actually a good thing. But now, you made a couple of references earlier that made me think of Jody Lynn, including a financial reference. She's a financial advisor, financial coach too, in addition to being a farm girl. And Jody Lynn, when you're listening to this, I mean, all this is resonating because he's talking about the value of coaching. He's talking about the importance of mindset. I mean, this is like right in your wheelhouse, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And even like, as you were talking, Abby, about the status and self-actualization, I think the last episode that we were on, I believe anyway, it's been a couple of weeks, but we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is a conversation that I've been having in my coaching practice a whole lot, is that there's this belief system in our society that once I reach this status, then I will be happy. I will be fulfilled. I will have self-esteem. I will self-actualize. But it's not with the actual money that you get there. And a lot of people that I've witnessed, they end up saying, I put the ladder up against the wrong building and I thought it would get me this. And I got there and it didn't. And it's profound that we're having this conversation now. I agree with everything that you're saying. That mindset, the letting go of that status, and really stepping into what makes you happy is, I think, in my opinion, the first steps to self-actualization or that journey.
Avi made the observation, Jody Lynn, that he didn't feel like he'd gotten to self-actualization yet. Do you feel like you've gotten there?
Me?
Yeah.
I feel, when I feel into it, I would say that we're never really truly there.
Oh, okay.
I think that there's different phases with everything. Like, you can look at any facet of life, axe throwing, for example. You get to the next level, the next level, the next level, and there's different tweaks that you're making in each one of those. And I think self-actualization is like that too, of growing and changing what is in this now moment may not have been in the last one or in the future.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting topic because there are a lot of different ways we can look at it. I mean, for myself, I think that I keep finding new levels of self-actualization. So I keep saying, well, yeah, I did get there. And then I got to the next one. Then I got to the next one. Then I got to the next one.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'm always self-actualized. It's just to a new level every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of life, though. And a lot of people are looking and, I guess, bred in our culture, it's beaten into us. You got to get to this point. We're always waiting to get to that finish line. That's not life. I think life is about the journey over and over and over again, becoming more and more who you truly are.
Yeah. So, Avi, let me do a follow-up here then, because I think we pretty much are all in agreement on what your foundation is there. All right. Yeah. But one of the factors that does play in, and this comes up an awful lot, so that's why I want to bring it up with you. One of the big factors that does play in is the role of the subconscious or unconscious mind. And that usually ties back to, childhood experiences and all that kind of stuff. It could even be later life experiences, but stuff that, just keeps replaying in the head and so forth. In your view, what role does that play either in a complementary way or in a resistant way to the whole self-actualization process that you're discussing?
There's a direct correlation. So trying to be aware of these things, right? Because oftentimes we're just so in the moment that we don't really, like, sometimes, for example, I'll be in a situation and something happens and then I'll reflect on it much later and be like, oh, why did I react that way? Why did I think that at that time? So to make that decision, right? So being cognizant of that, our subconscious and our actual consciousness, and reflecting on it regularly I think is how we can frame the changes that we're making and how that affects us. So I do a lot of thinking. So I was diagnosed as a young man with bipolar disorder, type 1, and major depressive disorder. So for a long time, I didn't understand, why I was overthinking things. But when I actually spoke to a doctor and he said that to me, it was like, oh, now I understand how I work better. Now I can be better prepared to work through things. Whereas before I just thought there was something really wrong with me, but now I understand myself better and I overanalyze the hell out of everything. So like my mind is running in 1,000 different directions, trying to like process things. And I just have to take a moment to step back and be like, whoa, look at the situation and look at different angles, right? What is this rationally? What is this irrationally? Am I thinking about this emotionally? So like taking the time to really reflect, I think, is the key to growth, right? That's how we better understand ourselves. And it's easier said than done because we have so many things we're doing. Like oftentimes we don't take that time to just stop and reflect and plan accordingly. So, for example, ironically, there's another guy also goes by Walt, and he has one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it's Walt Disney. He said, make a commitment and work towards it until you achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, all the obstacles and troubles in my life have strengthened me. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. And Greg Reed further reinforced that notion by saying, a dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. A plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. And I think that process, it can be for anything. It doesn't have to be like a business goal or it could be a personal goal. Whatever it is though, that actually having a blueprint and a strategy rather than just like going through the motions, right, helps us to grow and climb that pyramid, that Maslow's hierarchy, right? So we can effectively like see how we are growing, you know, in real time and being able to measure it and, you know, and look at it and really have a grasp on it.
Interesting to me. You described yourself as having been diagnosed bipolar, and you also talked about how you have a tendency to overthink. I thought, geez, well, I never said I was bipolar, but I'm really good at overthinking.
I had the exact same thought.
Like I'm a world champion there. I'll set my own overthinking up against anybody. I don't care who it is.
and the great thing too that I discovered, and I've discovered a lot of things about myself becoming a speaker, right? So one of the revelations I made, and I was on another podcast show with Nina Perez, and we talked about this. And she said, well, I do make excuses in my life. And I'm like, that's a fair point, right? We do at times. And to be able to recognize that and be truthful and honest about that it takes vulnerability. That's not an easy thing to do. But being able to actually do that and name it and work through that. So for me, that's looked like, okay, there are going to be days where, you know, it's not good for me, but depression has taught me gratitude for the people in life that make me happy. So on those days when they're down and I just cannot get out of that funk, I think about the people that make me happy. And it doesn't necessarily mean I'll have a great day but at least it reminds me that there are happier days to be had, that there are people in life that care about me. And that does help me even a little bit. And when it comes to bipolar, like, one of those side effects are mania. So I have a ton of built up energy, not constantly, but like irregularly. And when it does happen, it's a choice, right? You can be constructive, you can be destructive. And most of the time I prefer to be constructive. So I pour that energy into something positive that helps me grow, like speech writing or work that I'm doing or project for self-publishing, whatever it might be. I take that energy and I filter it I siphon it into something positive in my life. Mm-hmm. And that energy is powerful. I mean, it's like hard to like tame it, but it's possible. It can be done. And it's not just, that analogy doesn't just apply to mania. It could be different things that we experience in life where we feel an abundance of something, right?
Sure.
And how we choose to use that energy.
It really is quite a powerful thing that we are able, as human beings, even if we don't know it, we are able to redirect our attention to that which we like better, that which feels better to us, and get better results just from that focusing. Mm-hmm. It's rather an amazing thing. Like you said, it's a very powerful energy. But I think most of us don't really realize that it's true. I wouldn't say most of us. I'd say there's a large chunk of us that don't even realize that it's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that all ties back to the whole self-awareness, right?
Right.
How, you know, what's going on in our lives, what's going inside our minds, what's going on in the people around us, you know, how are we evaluating ourselves and what is the plan that we have to grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also mentioned the power of gaining the most growth from frustrations and failures. I don't remember what the exact adjectives and nouns were that you used, but basically things that go wrong in life, which is true. I mean, that's Jody Lynn. How many times have we talked about that? I mean, this is something that comes up every show. You know, it's true. It's frustrating as heck that that's where we do most of our learning, but that's where it all happens.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of failure too. That's such an interesting concept to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also is a very powerful thing in terms of how we look at it and frame it, right?
Yeah.
And the analogy I like best is the boxing analogy, which is, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Learn from the rounds you lose and you come back harder and stronger. Life is ebbs and flows. We're going to win some rounds. We're going to lose some rounds. For me, especially growing up, I lost at something. I'm a loser forever. It's all over. I can never be good at this. But now it's like, wait, Mike Tyson got knocked out.
Yeah. How about
Muhammad
that?
Ali got knocked out even once.
Yeah.
Right? Even the best, they will have their time. Nobody goes through life perfectly without having rounds that they're knocked down in. But the point isn't that they got knocked down. It's about that they got back up. Right? And they took what they learned from those rounds that they lost to come back harder and stronger and remained champions even when they got knocked down again.
And I've actually referenced this. There's one interview, only one out of all the nearly 2,000 that I've done over the last 10 plus years that I did not publish. And I for some reason, I like going back to this one because it keeps illustrating the same point over and over again, I guess. But there were reasons why I didn't publish it. It had to do with the guest attacking a co-host who wasn't there. And I said, okay, I'm not going to publish that. But the other thing that was interesting about this guy was that he didn't have failures on the way to success. He decided at age 17 he was going to become a millionaire, and he did it at 18, his first try. And the thing that's really interesting about it is he was a miserable guy. He was absolutely miserable because he hadn't gone through failure, and he didn't know how to teach failure. He was trying to be a coach. He was trying to be a coach to other people, but he didn't know how to do it because there was nothing to share with them because he hadn't failed.
Yeah.
Well, I think that brings up like something that you were saying, Avi, is that, you know, the frame of mind that we have around failing, you know, well, this guy who made $1 million in, you know, most of our society, we would say that's a huge success, and maybe he didn't go through any failures, but maybe just to put a spin on it, maybe this was his failure, that it was easy and that he didn't know how to teach other people. And I think we get so caught up in our own mind, going back to status on what is failure. You know, if I don't do this perfectly, then I am a failure. I am a loser, all of these things. And if you can just reprogram that part of you or look at it from a different perspective or a higher perspective. I always go back to Garth Brooks' song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers. You know, if he talks about in that song of like, if God would have answered his prayer to be with this woman, he wouldn't have found the love of his life. And he was perceiving at that moment that it was a failure until he got more information. And I was just having this conversation with myself while I was reflecting the other day that my life is 1,000 million times, you know, vastly different than it was 5 years ago. And I am 1 million times happier. Is it exactly where I thought I'd be? No. And that doesn't mean that it's a failure. There's more to come. The best is yet to come. And I truly believe that.
It makes total sense to me. Yeah. It's so funny how this thing works, but yeah, it really does make total sense. It's also interesting that we have these experiences. We think of them as failures. And like you were describing, Avi, we tend to we awfulize them, to use the phrase of my friend Joel Elston. We awfulize them. How ironic that the things that benefit us the most are the things we awfulize. If we only understood that this thing that we're awfulizing actually is going to help us, maybe we think about it differently. But of course, when you're in the middle of the moment, when you're dealing with the failure, you're like, oh, I can't believe this thing happened. That's not the way it was supposed to work. You know, all this stuff goes on. You know, the last thing you're thinking about is, boy, was I lucky to have that failure? So I guess my question to you is, how do you remember that when you're in the midst of it?
Well, you know, it's part of the process of learning and achieving success, and through trial and error. So essentially, it's something that it's inevitable, right? And from a very young age, we're programmed to be this, right? Right? Here's your grade letter. You get a B. You're a B student. You're a B person. You're a B spouse. You're a B friend. You're a C minus this. You're an A plus this. You'll do good in life because you're an A plus student. No, that's not how it works. In fact, I think the people that are most successful are the ones that faced the most adversity and struggled the most. Tony Robbins, he was homeless. He's the greatest. He's one of the greatest motivational speakers of all time. Amazon nearly went out. They were a bookstore. They almost went out of business multiple times. Very close. Mm-hmm. And now, Jeff Bezos, incredible, but, any person that achieved greatness, so the reference that you mentioned, luck happens, right? There are going to be people and they'll win a lottery ticket, but to the point of there are different unexpected ways where we can look at failure where maybe it looks like success, but really maybe that's a failure or foreshadowing failure that's short to come, right? And something that we have to all deal with. And there's a very, very small percentage, and I think that the people that don't really experience failure are people that are born into royalty, which is for the most part almost nobody, right? Very, very small percentage. So for them, and it doesn't, having a certain status or this money or that, we have this notion that, okay, that means X, Y, and Z, like Jody Lynn you were referring to about how, trying to reach this status, this amount of money, achieving this or that. That doesn't always reflect. Because there's a analogy or a story that goes, there's a prince and he lives in this palace that's surrounded by guards and everything's perfect. Everybody does things for him. And the moment he steps outside of that perimeter, he sees people that are poor. He sees people that are suffering and he can't live with himself. It's just too much for him. He just can't comprehend it, right? So having a certain notion about, failure and what that looks like may not look the same for every person. It can really vary.
I'm not even sure it's something that royalty don't experience because I think about Prince Harry and Meghan. They've experienced a little adversity, just a tad.
It's a very interesting story there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where you would, in that kind of environment, in my perception of what happens there, you would fail the most. Imagine being a kid. You couldn't be a kid. You're not sitting straight enough. You're not using the right footwork. You're not you're too loud. I feel in that environment, you constantly feel like you're not measuring up and that you're always failing. But it's wild the way that we all see the world differently through our own perceptions and how unique that is.
Well, that's what makes life so interesting. That's what makes this show so interesting. We get all these really cool perspectives here. And I've often made the statement that I've loved all the guests that I've interviewed and the co-hosts like yourself, Jody Lynn, who I have on a more regular basis here on the show. And the thing that I love the most, however, are the ones who challenge me the most. The ones who they give me a perspective that I hadn't thought of before. And that I have to kind of sit back and say, okay, how am I going to counter that? I got to come and think of something clever, But it gets me thinking. That's the point, right? It gets me thinking about something in a way that I hadn't thought of it before. That's what the real value of perspective is. It's helping you to think about something in a way that you hadn't thought of before.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Jody Lynn, when you think about this in regard to your clients, the people you work with, and now you're working mainly with people on financial issues, but one of the thoughts that comes to my mind, and you probably have experienced this in a different way, sort of a related way. There are coaches who work with clients for relationship purposes, for instance. And one of the stories that comes out of some of those people that I've interviewed who do that kind of coaching or therapy or whatever is that very often there are people who have Jeff Bezos level. They're multimillionaires or billionaires or whatever, and their relationships are in tatters. So I like to refer to this one a lot because it has a great big number to it, and that's why I like it so much. But I mentioned Joel Elson. He's one of my co-hosts. He does the Tuesday show with me, and nice. Joel has this really interesting background, and he is. I couldn't even begin to do justice to all the things that he's done with his life. But he had one story that he told one time where he was coaching a gentleman who was a billionaire. And this particular billionaire, they were doing it as a Zoom call so they could see each other on the computer screen, right? And this particular billionaire was wrestling with something that Joel had said to him. Joel had challenged him in a certain way. And so he just kind of looked away from the screen for a bit. He sees a piece of paper on his desk and picks it up. He says, "Oh, forgot about that." And Joel says, "What is it?" He says, "Oh, it's a $17 million dividend check. I just forgot I deposited it." There's a great example of perspective, right? To him, a $17 million dividend check was nothing. It meant absolutely nothing at all. Because what he was dealing with, I don't know what it was, but maybe his relationship with his wife or his kids or something like that to him was the big issue. That dividend check, who cared? Completely different perspective from most people. But it shows just what the value of that perspective is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jody Lynn, when you're working with your clients, I mean, you're doing it from the perspective of helping them with financials. Do you find that there are people who already have their relationships sorted out, or they've got their health issues sorted out, and finances is their thing they're working on? Or do you find that there are people who just need work on everything?
I find that there's a common thread of whatever their issue is that they're experiencing in money throughout every other area of their life. There's something showing them. Like, for example, I don't know that billionaire guy, but he was like, oh, $17 million, insignificant. He could care less.
Yeah.
I would be curious if he also treats his spouse like that, or certain things that she feels are important to her or make her feel loved, fill her love tank. I find, especially in the abundance consciousness practice that I have, so teaching people how to move through their money stories and attract more abundance and live an abundant life, it's never about money. It's, this perception that they have of like, oh, when I have money, then people are going to think I'm awful, or I'm an asshole, or nobody's going to like me, and I'm not safe to have money because people come after me, or the government, or whatever the story is. There's a related thread that runs deep through all of the areas. And I see that in myself with a lot of different things that I've worked through too, is that, it was showing up in money and I could see it there. And when I started to pinpoint what is the subconscious program that's running, or what is the perspective that I'm stuck on that keeps getting me to this spot, I could see a relation in relationships. I could see a relation in, every single thing, my health, my wealth, everything was connected. So.
Very interesting. Yeah. So it kind of makes anybody who hears you say that kind of take pause and take inventory and say, okay, what's my thread?
Yeah.
That's not easy to answer.
No, it's not. Like, something that was big for me was I never felt like I had enough time. And I always felt like I was behind. So I'd wake up in the morning and feel like I hadn't done enough. And it was something that I wasn't conscious of. I was conscious of how I felt. Like, I was like, when I woke up in the morning, like, I gotta go, whatever. Right. And so to follow that thread, I felt like I hadn't done enough. So I was like beating myself up. I was very negative in my own head. You should have done more already. Like, it's 7 a.m. You should have done more. Like, what? I never asked any of those kinds of questions, but you follow the thread through. And I was so, consumed with, I got to get to work. I got to get to the office. Like, even though I didn't have an appointment or anything, nobody was there at 7 a.m. And nobody wants me to call them at 7 a.m. Let's be honest here. I need to get to the office because I should have already been working. I should have already meditated and read my 10 pages for the day and read my goals and done all of these things. So I would rush through life, and I would rush to get to the office, and then I wouldn't pack a lunch. And then I would wait until I was starving at 2:00 and be like, I'm so hungry. I just need to eat, like, right now. Anything will do. And then I would notice on my balance sheet at the end of the month that I was spending, $500-600 at McDonald's. Well, that's not serving my body. It wasn't serving my checkbook. That's not where I want the money to go to. But it was this thread of like, I gotta be somewhere else. And I wasn't paying attention to how I feel or why. And that's how I treated my relationships before I met my husband. Every relationship before that obviously failed. But they were all, not most of them, all of them, if you will, were transactional. I treated people like a transaction. And awakening to that, seeing how I treated everything in my life as a transaction was like, cut me off at the knees and punch me in the gut. That was a hard one to see how everything was connected and how I wasn't opening up to anyone in a relationship or the people that I was friends with, or most of the people. Like, I guarded myself. And I didn't make time for those things because of the perception of I don't have enough time.
Okay, now this is interesting. I'm going to tie this back to our original topic because Avi's basic concept is you want to reactivate your spark. And when I think of the spark, I think of the spark as being like a spark of energy. I'm not sure how you think of it, so you'll have to elucidate on that, Avi. But the thought that occurs to me is, well, if we're giving so much attention to something, we could argue that there's a whole lot of energy going into that. But that's not really the same thing as the spark. So let's talk about the difference between that kind of awfulizing focus and the spark.
Absolutely. Yeah. So activating your spark is all about, try taking a class or course you're interested in, going to a conference or event, network with people, finding a mentor, or joining a group in person or online you share similar interests with, right? It's finding that thing. For me, that initial spark was something much smaller, which was axe throwing. That sparked me. It's like, oh wow, I'm throwing a tool and it feels good and I'm talking with people and they like me because I'm good at throwing an axe accurately at a board. But it was an initial spark, but then it sparked something much bigger, which was like, sure, winning the championship, that was a great feeling, but an even better feeling was the fact that I got to speak and inspire my entire league when I won. I got the chance to speak because I won. And everybody listened and they loved it. And they told me I inspired them. And that was the pinnacle, right? That was where it was at for me. And at the same time, I was like, I spent a lot of time reflecting on this. I'm like, this is not a practical thing to expect that most people can just walk in and win a championship, but they shouldn't be denied that opportunity to feel what it feels like to be a champion. And it doesn't mean you have to win a trophy either. And that is something that I grappled with a lot. Do you actually need to be the best at something? And the answer is no. The answer is that spark can be doing something you find meaningful. It could be volunteering. It could be doing something that you didn't know you were good at, right? It's about maximizing your opportunities to find that thing that gives us a reason for being, or gives our heart, makes our heart beat, right? So that's what activating a spark is all about. And I would say they're all important in that process of the BAC. But activating the spark is a really important one. And I did want to also touch on the whole idea of money, which is very fascinating to me, if that's okay. Yeah. I think that's very interesting, and listening to Jody, Lynn, what you were saying really resonated with me, because growing up, money was like a very transactional thing, and that affected my ability, or not ability, but my frame of mind of how I viewed relationships, right? Oh, you give somebody a gift and that is how you earn their love and affection and admiration. And that was a very flawed thing that I am still working on. But, yeah, a lot of these things we learn from a young age. When we see these, they expect them to be, these are normal behaviors, right? This is what my parents do. So this is okay. This is normal. And they may not be normal, and we may not realize that right away. And it takes time to rewire. But the important thing is okay, what is money really evil, or is it how we use money? Money can be used for good things. Money actually isn't evil. It's all about how we use it, right? A vehicle can get us from point A to point B, or we can drive it right into a building. It's like, what is the intention? How are we using these things? And I think money is a very powerful thing. I think it could be a very good thing. But growing up, I did have a very bad relationship with it because of things that happened in my family that made me feel like, oh, money is a bad thing because I saw it used in a bad way. Mm-hmm. So that for me was, it's a lot of growing, but I found that very interesting. I was really able to relate to that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
But both of you made reference to transactional, and you did so in a way that suggested that the transactional approach was lacking in some way. Talk about why that's lacking in your view.
You want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I think that transactional is okay in a business sense, but for personal relationships, I think that should be totally like separated. Like that should not be. It should strictly be for business or like in the context of certain activities or things. But like in order to like form a meaning, like a personal relationship, it shouldn't have to be transactional, right? Like one of my friends said to me once, there was a girl that I was really interested in, and it was very, very transactional. And he's like, Avi, if you stopped hanging out with us and I just sent you money, like, would we still be friends? Like, you don't have to send somebody money to be their friend or for them to like you. They should like you for who you are just by having your presence and your time, which is a much greater resource. Time is our most precious resource, much more so than money. But I think when we think about, when you ask most people, the first thing that comes to mind is it's money, right? Money makes the world go round, right? But it's time that you can never get back. Money comes and goes. So I think that there's something to be said about that, and that having authentic, meaningful relationships that are deeply meaningful should not revolve around money. And I think when it does, like that, there's like some maybe like therapy or, things that have to be rewired, because relationships should be based on time and knowing somebody personally, not have to do with money. But in business, yeah, it should be transactional. It's what business is.
How about you, Jody Lynn?
It's funny because I always go back to the definition, so I immediately look up the definition of transaction. Okay. And it's a business deal, an instance of buying or selling something. And when I really like feel into the word of transaction and how I've experienced it and how I've been a part of that, the word itself and a transactional relationship is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that, in my opinion, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think some things are naturally going to be transactional. You buy, a t-shirt off of Amazon, transactional. Done, easy, whatever. That's what you wanted. You got what you wanted. And when I think about humans and our interaction with people and being in business as a coach and a financial advisor, being transactional is the surface level. It's the maybe the lowest level of relationship that you can have with somebody. And for me, the problem I have with transactional relationships is that it's only surface level. It goes no deeper than that because it doesn't have the time maybe, or the individuals involved in that transaction are not open to it. And I think there's a lot left on the table that's missed when you're transactional. You're not actually opening up your heart and who you truly are when you're living on that surface. So for me, the realization in that I was having transactional relationships and I was treating a lot of things like transactions was that depth of connection that I really desired. And how if I was to live my life in that surface level frame of mind or whatever you want to call it, I would not have the depth of relationship or the depth of joy, the depth of love, the depth of everything that I was meant to experience. And I think humanity is meant to experience.
And Avi is shake his head yes up and down, so he's agreeing with that.
Yeah, I did want to reframe one thing that I said that Jody said that made me think about something. So there can be times where I think that it is like things have to be transactional. Like my daughter is sick. I went to buy her medicine. Like that was a loving act, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like I think so the thing that I want to ask, what is the greatest marketing ploy in history?
Ooh.
It's anybody want to try?
I don't know.
It's you have to buy a woman a diamond ring for her to love you, right? Is that not the greatest marketing ploy in history? That you have to buy a diamond to prove your love to a woman to marry you. Before that, it was just, no, you showed up, you worked hard, you cared about your family every day. You show up, right? Not you buy this one time. And I get it. Like it's a traditional thing, but I thought the essence of how they were able to get people on board with that is fascinating.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree with that. I got a fat rock.
No shame in that.
I think that you're right, is that, oh, I have to buy somebody something for them to love me. The bigger the rock is, the, whatever. I was engaged before I met my husband. And we broke up before I met my husband. But he got me a 1 carat diamond ring, and it was really important to him that it was a 1 carat diamond ring, and that everybody knew that it was a 1 carat ring. And that really was the circle of friends that I hung out with. It was the 1 carat plus club. Like it meant something. And I realized how transactional that was and how superficial it was, because it meant nothing. Now, fast forward to, that relationship ended. Thank goodness. It was exactly what needed to happen. Didn't feel like it at the time though. But fast forward to meeting my now husband. When we talked about getting married, it was all about the partnership, and it was about what we wanted to bring to the table with us as a couple and how we wanted to support one another and everything like that. And I remember him asking me, like, what do you want for a ring? And I was like, well, just like anything. It's just trying to be, pleasant. And he's like, no, seriously. Like, if you could have it all your way. And I said, oh, if I could have it all my way. I remember this ring that I saw when I was like 18 years old in a magazine, and I just fell in love with it because it looked like a princess's ring. Like I have always loved this ring, never saw it in person. And the brand was Takori, and it's a fancy brand. So you're paying brand name prices and whatever. Right.
Right.
And he says, okay, well, there's a trunk show, and there's only one place in the city next to where we lived that has this type of ring. Do you want to go? And when I saw it in person, I didn't care how big the ring was. I didn't care anything about it. It was just that vision that I had in my 18-year-old self. Like, if I could have it all my way, I would want this. And then I left it in his hands saying, it doesn't have to be that one. Like, you could get me a knockoff. I don't care. Like, I want to marry you. And literally the day that I married him, he bought said ring, by the way. That's what I have is he bought me the ring that I wanted. And on the day that I married him, we had the storm of the century, I think. And it was all an outdoor wedding. We had tents and stuff like that, but the ceremony was outdoors on my parents' farm. And I was literally, there's a picture of me sitting beside the door in my big wedding dress. And like, I'm just sitting, staring out the screen door. and they're like, oh, are you upset? Or whatever, right? Cause our wedding was delayed by 45 minutes. And no, I'm not upset. And I just like keep checking my imaginary watch. Like, what time is it? What time is it? They're like, why are you so anxious? And I just said, I just want to marry that man. Like, I don't care if any of the guests are there. Can I just go marry that man? I will stand in the rain for him. And that's true today.
I think what you guys are bringing this to is something that I kind of had in mind when I raised the question about this transactional concept. And I'm going to get there by muddying the waters. As Jody Lynn knows, sometimes I like to make things clear. Sometimes I like to just muddy things because it's more fun. This time I'm going to muddy things a little bit. But it's been pointed out on many occasions that money is really, and the exchange of money is really just an energy exchange. Mm-hmm. That it is indeed literally nothing more than a physical representation of something that happens energetically. So if we think about a transaction in those terms, then what's really happening is an exchange of energy. So if we're talking about something that is more than an exchange of energy, what is it? And the quick answer that comes to my mind is, well, it's a gift of energy. It's energy without asking for something in return. Mm-hmm. And I think that really ties in with what a lot of us associate with love. You were talking about love, Jody Lynn. For you, the ring was symbolic, which is what a ring is anyway. The ring was symbolic, but what the real thing was, I just love this man. I just want to give my love to him.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't even thinking about whether he was going to give it back.
No.
That wasn't even part of the equation.
No.
So I think what we're talking about is how, as selves, we love the idea of a one-way energy exchange, which isn't really an exchange. It's a one-way. It's a gift, if you will. It's a gift of energy. It's a transfer of energy in one direction, and we place a lot of value on that.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Well, that brings up how I transitioned from being that transactional person. When I started to like reflect on that belief system that I was being transactional with people, what was underneath that was it's protecting me. Because when I care about somebody, I've been this way my entire life. When I care about somebody, I give them a piece of my heart. Like, and I will go to war for you. Like, you don't mess with my friends, the people that I love. Like, I will go to war for you. And then early on in my brokerage business, you know, I would be recruiting people and people would be, you know, getting licensed and on my team and I'd be building and then they would quit. And I would be giving my heart to them each time. And so I had this belief system, or I developed this belief system that I only have so much to give. And that when I give it to people, they might take it and I'll never get it back. Oh. And when I let go of those two things and just began to love with an open heart, understanding that it's a constant exchange and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just simply is. And you have more and more and more to give, essentially. When I came from that state, the depth of my relationships completely changed.
Yeah, that's one of those concepts that talk about the power of perspective. I was presented with a perspective on exactly that last point you made, this idea that energy can either be created or destroyed, with the channel David Strickle, who, Jody Lynn, you've met. You've interacted with David. And it was a session with The Stream. The Stream is the name of David Strickle's channeling entities, so to speak, Avi. And the message that came through from The Stream was really along this particular line, and I was asking a series of questions trying to understand the nature of the universe as non-physical energy understands it. And it led up to a point where I realized what they were talking about. They were talking about expansion, how we live in this life to constantly be expanding, and the whole purpose of all the stuff we go through is for expansion. And so I said, well, does that mean that we're creating energy? Because I was thinking about, you know, Newton's law, right? My energy can either be created or destroyed. They said yes. I said, well, wait a minute, we just upset Sir Isaac Newton. But this is a big deal. This is a big deal because, and I did a couple of follow-up questions, and what it all added up to is not only can energy be created, it can't be destroyed, so it's always increasing. And I said, oh, okay. Well, this is a fascinating concept. So if energy is always increasing, then regardless of whether we're being transactional or just giving, it almost doesn't make any difference from a universal perspective because it's all increasing. Mm-hmm. And so I had to start rethinking a whole bunch of stuff because of that. A whole bunch of assumptions that I had. And I'm still working through them. I mean, that conversation happened about 12 months ago, something like that. I'm still working on it. 12 months later, I still haven't filtered all that out yet. But it certainly opens up all kinds of possibilities. So I throw that out there as a last thing for you guys to address before we start to wrap it up. So what Avi, when you're hearing that, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that had got me thinking about a lot of things. So, one thing Jody Lynn mentioned, that got me thinking, I'll go to war for you, right? For me, that looks like you have to be good for your word, which is like kind of like an old school train of thought. But like for me, I take it very seriously. When somebody's not good for their word, like, I identify them as a certain way, like this person is not trustworthy. And there was a thing that happened, which is a point I want to bring back to. A friend I worked for 4 years. He was a best friend of mine. Knew him since like second grade. I worked for his company. And it got intermingled between friendship and business, and it ended up going really, really badly. And that to me looked like really negative energy, right? Because now I'm very bitter. I'm upset. I'm disappointed. I felt taken advantage of. All these negative energy things, right? So it's at one point it was really good, right? Things were going well, like very happy. But then like hey, you wanted to borrow my credit cards. And I'm like, okay, well, he'll get me back for that. And he said he would do this, so he'll be good for it, right? But he wasn't good for anything he said. And so that left me with a very angry feeling. And it took me 2 years. Just recently I saw him at a friend's barbecue because he's in an inner circle with all my best friends, which made it even worse because I felt super uncomfortable being around my friends being like, is he spying on me? Is he telling him what we're talking about right now? And just when I actually got to the point where I forgave him, which is literally just like 3 weeks ago, it was such a relief taken off my shoulders. And there's a quote, and it really is so true, by Lewis Smedes. To forgive someone is to set a prisoner free and discover that prisoner was you. Wow. It was hard. I don't know that because I saw him a year after, and I was so angry when I saw him because the first thing that he said was he brought up his business and how well it's doing, which is the last thing I wanted to talk about. Like, if we talked about something else, like, fine. And this second time, though, I had really let it go completely. And he talked about his business again, and I just smiled. And I said, okay. He might be socially awkward. He doesn't know that bothers me, but whatever. I don't care anymore. I've let that go, and it just made me feel so much better. I wasn't stressed worrying about like this or that, or, I'm not comparing myself to him anymore. I'm comparing myself to the person I was yesterday. But it did make me think of like, yeah, energy is always increasing, and it is an exchange, but I think there can be negative energy too. And not to get into politics, but like I look at somebody like Putin, and I get a very strong sense of negative energy. Like, this guy is not making friends. He has a certain intention and things he's trying to do that the world is looking at and is being like, this guy's got a lot of negative energy. And maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I don't know that's just my thoughts that I wanted to share.
That's great. I love that. Jodlyn, you want to bring this home for us?
Yeah. In the darkest times of my life, that I thought were the most negative, the most atrocious moments of my life, sitting in that feeling, being in that space, being in that energy, really opened my eyes to the light and the good and the beauty that really is in the world. And so I think that the negative can be transmuted to the light, and that all is truly just one. And as the energy expands, so will we. And that's what it's all about.
See, that's one reason, Avi, why I have Jody Lynn as a co-host. I mean, did you get a better summary than that one? Like, wow.
That's why you have her on the show. Okay, that makes sense. Whoa. Bring it all home.
Thank you.
Wow, that was fabulous. Now, actually, there's something we didn't touch on, because you have a newsletter that we hadn't even mentioned yet. We got to talk about that.
Yes. That's right. So I know, Jody Lynn, you said you grew up on a farm, or you're a farmer, right? So my analogy is the having eggs. Those are our opportunities. Those are our things that we want to work on, and not all of them are going to hatch. Some of them, maybe we give them more attention to, we care more about them, wait and see what this happens. Maybe we'll push this one to the back and just focus on these. So a big egg for me that I really believe in and I love and I'm excited about is All-Star Parent. That is a parenting newsletter where we take all of the best, most notable and authoritative parenting figures in the industry, and we take their podcasts that are like 45 minutes, hour long, however long, and we break them into just like a 5-minute summary. Super easy to read. Find exactly what you need. We cover all areas on parenting, toddlers, teens, anything that you want. You can find it on All-Star Parent. It's free to sign up. You can subscribe on, just look it up. And our newsletter is called The Catch Up with All-Star Parent. It's a newsletter, and it's really phenomenal value. It's free. You just sign up. And I love it. I believe in it. It's given so much good value to parents that are starting out, or even ones that are more experienced. So that's the one thing that I did want to mention. And
is there like a website people can go to find it? I mean, what's the
It's substack.allstarparent.com.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll make sure we'll put a link into the show notes so that people can find it more easily.
Fantastic.
Good
Appreciate
stuff.
that.
So, okay, well, this has been a really, really interesting conversation. I don't know how many rabbit holes we went down, but we basically dug up half the yard. So that's okay. This is a good thing. We learn a lot whenever we do that. But I want to thank you for being on the show. And there's something else I want to thank you for that I make a point of thanking all of my guests for, because you made a lot of commentary about this too, about how you want to and value living to find ways to help others. And I'm sure you do it because I can tell you talk about it, and you talked about it here. I'm sure you do it in another podcast. You probably do it in your blog posts and whatever else you do it. And there are many people that we've never met, that we've never seen, they see our content, or they read it, or they hear it, or something like that, and we never know about it, and we don't know how they applied it, and we don't know what value but they got value out of it. They got something good out of it. And we have a tendency in our society to just kind of skip over that. I don't like that so much. So I like to take a moment to say, on behalf of those people you've never met and you've never seen, thank you for what you've been putting out there in content, because you are making a difference in this world.
Thank you all. It means so much. And I so appreciate you having me, you and Jody Lynn. It's been really an honor to be here.
Jody Lynn, we're glad that you're back. I mean, we're glad that the planning got done, but I'm glad that you're back.
Me too.
Wednesdays aren't as good when you're gone, so
thank you. This was a beautiful conversation. Thanks for being here, Abby.
Yes,
and thanks for having me again, Walt.
And thank you all for listening. We appreciate you as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.